"I'll take the bride no one wants," wrote the silent outcast. He was the lost Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our channel's new videos. It only takes a moment, it costs nothing, and it is one of the best ways to support us as we continue bringing you more dramatic, heartfelt, and unforgettable stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel and discovering who is joining us from across the world today. Now, let's begin today's story. Does any wolf here choose Clara Whitmore? The question crossed the moon hall for the third time, and for the third time no one answered. Clara stood alone beneath the silver arch of the moon-binding ceremony, her hands folded tightly before her pale blue dress, feeling hundreds of eyes settle on her like winter frost. Around her, candlelight shimmered across polished stone, white roses, and the ceremonial banners of 12 powerful packs. Every other bride had already been chosen. Every other name had been answered with an offered hand, a relieved smile, or applause from proud families. Clara had received only silence. She kept her chin lifted anyway. At 22, she had learned that humiliation became sharper when people saw you trying to escape it. "Perhaps we should offer an incentive," Gavin Whitmore called from among her relatives. A few guests laughed. Clara recognized that particular laugh. It was the sound people made when cruelty had been dressed cleverly enough to pass for humor. The Whitmore family could include 50 silver marks with her hand. More laughter followed. Clara looked toward the floor, not because she was ashamed of herself, but because she refused to give Gavin the satisfaction of seeing what his words had done. Her wolf had never awakened. In a world where rank, scent, and strength determined nearly everything, that made Clara an Omega people could dismiss. Before ever knowing her, the officiant cleared his throat. "If no one comes forward, the ceremony will conclude." Then came a sound so small it should have disappeared beneath the whispers. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Clara looked up. At the farthest edge of the hall sat a man everyone had carefully avoided. Elias Thorne, the silent outcast of White Pine Forest. His dark coat was worn at the cuffs, his hair slightly too long, and there was no crest pinned over his heart to announce family, rank, or pack. He had arrived alone and had spoken to no one because, according to every rumor Clara had heard, Elias could not speak at all. Now he held a small wooden writing board across one knee. His hand moved slowly across it. The laughter faded as people noticed him. Elias rose. He was taller than Clara expected, but there was nothing theatrical in the way he crossed the hall. No swagger, no challenge. He simply stopped several feet from her and turned the board around. For words were written across it. "I'll take the bride no one wants." The room erupted. Clara did not. She stared at Elias, searching his gray eyes for mockery and finding none. That unsettled her more than laughter would have. "You?" Gavin scoffed. "A nameless outcast thinks he can claim a Whitmore?" Elias never looked at him. His attention remained on Clara, as though she were the only person whose answer mattered. Clara swallowed. "Why?" she asked softly. Elias lowered the board and wrote again. Before he could show her, a silver cup struck the stone floor somewhere behind the gathering. An elderly councilman had dropped it. His face had gone completely pale. He was staring at Elias as though he had seen a ghost. More precisely, he was staring at his eyes. Those impossible storm-gray eyes. The old man had seen them once before, 12 years ago, on the night a young king vanished and an entire kingdom was told never to search for him again. Clara barely noticed the fallen cup. Her attention remained on Elias as he finished writing, his hands steady despite the whispers spreading through the moon hall. When he turned the board toward her, the message was simple. "Because you were kind when no one was watching." Clara blinked. Of all the answers she had expected, that was not one of them. "What does that mean?" Elias glanced toward a young servant standing beside the banquet tables. Clara recognized her immediately. Less than an hour earlier, the girl had stumbled while carrying a tray and spilled red wine across the sleeve of Clara's dress. Gavin had demanded that the servant be dismissed. Clara had quietly removed her cloak, placed it around the frightened girl's shoulders, and told everyone the spill had been an accident. She had not known anyone was watching. Elias wrote again. Everyone here showed me who they were tonight. So did you. Something tightened in Clara's chest. For years, people had measured her by everything she lacked. No awakened wolf. No useful rank. No powerful father to negotiate her future. Yet this silent stranger had noticed the one thing no ceremony could measure. Her choices. Gavin stepped forward. Clara, surely you are not considering this. She finally looked at him. A few minutes ago, you were offering money to anyone willing to marry me. His expression hardened. That was different. Why? Clara asked. Gavin had no answer that did not reveal the truth. Elias had no title, and that made him unacceptable to people who had just declared Clara unacceptable. The irony almost made her smile. The officiant approached cautiously. Elias Thorne, do you understand that Clara must accept freely? Elias nodded at once. Then, unexpectedly, he handed the board to Clara. Written beneath his earlier words was another sentence. If you say no, I will leave, and no one here will hear judgment from me. Clara read it twice. No demand, no claim, no attempt to use her embarrassment against her. For the first time that evening, someone had given her something more valuable than approval. A choice. Then I have one question, she said. Are you choosing me because you feel sorry for me? Elias shook his head. He took the board back and wrote slowly. Pity looks down on someone. I do not. The hall seemed strangely distant. Clara studied the man before her. His clothes were modest. His name carried no influence. He possessed neither a visible wolf mark nor a family crest. By every rule Clara had been taught, accepting him would make her situation worse. Yet every instinct she trusted told her that dignity was worth more than status. Then yes, she said, I accept. Silence swept across the hall before startled whispers replaced it. Elias did not celebrate. He simply placed one hand over his heart and bowed to Clara, not as a master acknowledging what belonged to him, but as one equal honoring another. Across the room, the elderly councilman slowly retrieved his silver cup. His fingers trembled. 12 years had changed the young king's face, but not that gesture. He remembered it from the old royal court. Only one bloodline bowed with the right hand over the heart. The vanished house of Thorne. And if Elias truly was who the old man feared he was, then Clara Whitmore had just accepted far more than a silent outcast. She had unknowingly opened a door that the kingdom had spent 12 years trying to seal. By sunrise, Clara Whitmore was married to a man who had never spoken a single word to her. The ceremony took place in the smaller moon chapel behind the great hall, with only the officiant, 2 witnesses, and Gavin standing nearby with an expression that suggested Clara had personally offended him by refusing to remain unwanted. Elias stood opposite her beneath a narrow window where morning light touched his storm-gray eyes. When the officiant asked him to make his vow, Elias lifted his wooden board. I choose freely, and I will honor her freedom as I honor my own. Clara felt something inside her become unexpectedly still. There was no promise that she would obey him, no declaration that she now belonged to him, only choice. When her turn came, she repeated the same vow. Elias looked at her for a long moment, then bowed with his right hand over his heart. The elderly councilman watching from the doorway went pale again. Less than an hour later, Clara left the Whitmore estate with one travel case and the clothes she owned. Elias had arrived on foot, so they walked north together toward White Pine Forest. The road narrowed after 3 miles, leaving the grand houses behind until pine trees surrounded them and the air smelled of cedar, damp earth, and approaching rain. Elias carried Clara's case without being asked. Whenever the trail became uneven, he slowed rather than reaching for her, as though she could not manage it herself. That small restraint told Clara more about him than 100 polished speeches could have. His home appeared near dusk, a modest stone cottage beside a clear creek. It was simple but carefully kept, with stacked firewood, clean windows, and herbs growing beneath the kitchen sill. Inside, Elias lit 2 lamps and placed her case beside a bedroom door. Then he took his board and wrote 3 lines. I will never command you. I will never mark you without your permission. If you ever want freedom, I will open the door myself. Clara read the words slowly. Those are your rules? Elias nodded. Then I have one. He raised an eyebrow. No lies. For the first time, something almost like amusement warmed his face. He wrote beneath her rule, agreed. Their marriage began there, not with passion or destiny, but with boundaries and trust. Yet over the next several days, Clara discovered that very little about Elias matched the life he appeared to live. He repaired a broken chair like a carpenter, prepared meals with the precision of someone accustomed to caring for himself, and treated the traveling merchants who passed his cottage with the same courtesy he had shown Clara. But other details made no sense. He owned books written in the ancient wolf tongue, a language Clara had seen only in royal archives. When she casually misidentified a faded symbol as an old hunting crest, Elias corrected her by writing its full ceremonial meaning from memory. One evening, Clara found him studying a map of the northern Pax. Small marks had been placed beside mountain passes, rivers, supply roads, and abandoned watchtowers. You understand military maps? She asked. Elias became motionless. Then he folded the map and wrote, I read a great deal. It was technically an answer. Clara was beginning to suspect it was not the truth. That night, she woke shortly after midnight and heard the heavy cellar door close downstairs. She followed the sound. Into the kitchen. A new iron lock had been fastened across the cellar entrance from the outside, yet Elias was nowhere in the house. Clara stared at the door. Then something moved beyond the windows. One wolf stepped from the trees. Then another. Then 6 more. Within minutes, more than 20 wolves stood silently around the cottage, all facing the cellar. Clara's heartbeat quickened. None approached. None threatened her. Instead, as moonlight spilled across the clearing, every wolf lowered its head at exactly the same moment. From somewhere beneath Clara's feet came the faint sound of Elias struggling to breathe. Then the cellar door trembled, and Clara understood something impossible. The wolves were not waiting to enter. They were waiting for the silent man below them to come out. Clara reached for the iron lock, then stopped when another strained breath rose from beneath the floor. Elias! No answer came, but she had expected none. Outside, the wolves remained perfectly still beneath the moonlight. 20 pairs of eyes watched the cottage, yet Clara sensed no hunger or hostility in them. What unsettled her was their patience. They were waiting. She found the key hanging behind a row of dried herbs, exactly where Elias must have left it. The moment Clara opened the cellar door, cold air climbed the stairs. She took a lamp and descended carefully. 12 steps below, the cellar widened into a circular stone chamber that looked far older than the cottage above it. Elias knelt at its center. His hands rested against the floor, and around him ran a ring of symbols carved into the stone. Pale silver light moved through those markings like moonlight trapped beneath ice. Elias! His head lifted sharply. Fear crossed his face, not fear for himself, but for her. He raised one hand, warning her to stay back. Clara almost obeyed. Then she noticed the wooden board several feet away. On it, written before he had come downstairs, were 4 words. Do not let me speak. Clara looked from the message to him. His breathing was uneven, and every few seconds he pressed his lips together as though holding back a sound. That is why you lock yourself down here. Elias gave the smallest nod. Clara stepped closer. He shook his head immediately. You promised me no lies, she whispered. Silence can become one if you hide enough behind it. Something softened in his expression, followed by shame. He reached toward the board but could not quite reach it. Clara picked it up and placed it in his hands. His fingers trembled as he wrote, Please go upstairs. Are you dangerous? Elias stared at that question for several seconds. Then he wrote, My voice might be. Before Clara could ask what that meant, a deep vibration passed through the stone beneath them. The silver symbols brightened. Outside, the wolves released a low, almost musical sound together. Elias closed his eyes. Clara should have been frightened. Instead, she remembered the man who had given her freedom before asking for trust. She moved into the circle and gently placed her hand over his. The reaction was immediate. Silver light raced around the ancient markings, then gathered beneath Clara's palm. Elias opened his eyes in astonishment. One symbol burned brighter than the others. A crescent moon crossed by 3 narrow lines. The pressure in the room vanished. Elias inhaled slowly, as though breathing freely for the first time in hours. Outside, every wolf lowered itself to the ground. By morning they were gone. Elias refused to explain the symbol. Before noon, Clara walked 2 miles to the small settlement beyond White Pine Creek, where an elderly keeper named Miriam Ash maintained a forgotten moon shrine. Clara drew the symbol on a scrap of paper. Miriam took one look and locked the shrine door. "Where did you see this?" she asked. "In my husband's cellar." The color left Miriam's face. She crossed the room to an ancient cabinet and removed a book wrapped in white cloth. "This mark has not appeared in 12 years. Clara's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Miriam hesitated. "The first howl." Clara waited, but Miriam closed the book. "That does not answer anything. It is not supposed to." Miriam lowered her voice. "Some kings inherit a crown, Clara. Others inherit something much older." "What?" Miriam looked toward the forest as if even the trees might be listening. "Command the wolf itself remembers." Clara thought of Elias fighting to remain silent while 20 wolves bowed outside his home. Suddenly his silence no longer seemed like a weakness. It seemed like restraint. Miriam gripped Clara's hand before she could leave. "If the mark truly awakened when you touched him, do not tell anyone." "Why?" Miriam's eyes settled on Clara with quiet fear. "Because the last time the first howl was heard, a king disappeared, history was rewritten, and an entire bloodline was erased from the royal records." Clara returned to the cottage before sunset, carrying Miriam's warning like a stone in her pocket. Elias was waiting beside the kitchen table. One glance at Clara's face told him she had learned something, and his expression tightened when she placed the drawing of the first howl between them. "Miriam Ash knew this symbol," Clara said. Elias closed his eyes. "She told me a king disappeared 12 years ago. She told me history was rewritten." He reached for his board, but Clara gently placed her hand over it. "Not yet. You promised me no lies. I am not asking you to speak. I am asking you to trust me." Elias looked toward the window, where evening shadows stretched between the pines. Finally, he stood and crossed to a narrow door Clara had assumed was a pantry. From beneath his shirt, he removed a small brass key. The room beyond contained no treasure, weapons, or royal clothing. It contained names. Hundreds of them. They covered sheets of paper pinned carefully across every wall. Men, women, healers, scouts, farmers, messengers. Each name had a hometown and a date written beneath it. Clara moved slowly through the room. "Who are they?" Elias picked up his board. "People who never came home after the night of the broken crown." Clara turned toward him. He wrote again. "I remember everyone." The weight behind those words changed the room. Elias opened an old journal and showed her a page written in the same precise hand she had come to recognize. 12 years earlier, the northern packs had been collapsing into conflict. Elias had been young, frightened, and desperate to stop it. He possessed something his advisors called the sovereign voice, an inheritance connected to the first howl. When he spoke with its full power, wolves obeyed before thought could become choice. Clara felt cold despite the warm room. "You commanded them." Elias nodded. His next message came slowly. "I believed obedience would create peace." Another line followed. "I was wrong." He explained that ambitious men around the throne had learned to turn his gift into a political weapon. Orders became more important than judgment. Loyalty became more important than conscience. By the time Elias understood what his power was doing to the kingdom, too many families had already paid the cost of decisions made above them. So he vanished. He surrendered his crown, erased his path, and made a vow never to use the sovereign voice again. "That is why you do not speak," Clara whispered. Elias wrote, "A voice that can take away choice should not be used carelessly." Clara looked around at the names. She finally understood why he remembered servants, why he never commanded her, why every rule in their marriage protected her freedom. His gentleness was not born from weakness. It had been built from regret. "You think being silent is your punishment." Elias did not answer. "Maybe punishment is easier than responsibility," Clara said softly. His eyes lifted to hers. "If you truly regret what happened, hiding forever does not help the people whose names are on these walls. Wisdom is not refusing to hold power. It is learning how to hold it without letting it own you." Elias stared at her for a long time. Then he wrote a question. "And if I fail again?" Clara picked up the chalk herself. Beneath his words, she wrote, "Then do better the next time." Something in Elias's face changed. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the first permission he had given himself to imagine it. A knock suddenly sounded at the front door. Elias froze. Nobody visited after dark. Clara followed him into the kitchen as he opened it. Miriam stood outside, breathless from the 2-mile walk, clutching the ancient book against her chest. "They know," she said. Elias went completely still. "Someone opened the sealed royal archive this afternoon. Marcus Vane has sent riders north." Clara looked toward Elias. Miriam's next words made the silence inside the cottage feel enormous. "They are not coming to find a missing man. They are coming because they finally know the lost king is alive." By midnight, the first lanterns appeared between the trees. Clara counted 12 before she stopped trying. They moved through white pine forest in 2 careful lines, too organized to be travelers and too quiet to be hunters. Elias stood beside the cottage window, watching them approach without reaching for a coat or packing a bag. Clara understood why. He had spent 12 years running. There was nowhere left to disappear without becoming a prisoner of his own fear. Miriam closed the ancient book and whispered, "Marcus Vane will not come alone." Elias wrote quickly on his board, "Take Clara south." Clara read the message and shook her head. No, his expression hardened. He wrote again, "You do not understand what he wants. Then explain it." Elias hesitated before writing 3 words. "He wants obedience." A knock sounded at the door. Not loud, not impatient. Somehow that made it worse. Elias opened it. A silver-haired man in an immaculate dark coat stood on the porch, surrounded by royal guards who remained several yards behind him. Marcus Vane smiled as though arriving for dinner. His eyes passed over Clara, Miriam, and finally settled on Elias. 12 years, Marcus said softly, and still hiding in cottages. Elias gave no response. Marcus placed one hand over his heart and bowed with exaggerated elegance. "Your Majesty." Clara had known what the evidence suggested, but hearing the words changed something. Elias Thorne, the man who carried firewood, repaired chairs, and asked permission before making decisions that affected her, had once ruled every northern pack. Marcus noticed her surprise. "He did not tell you?" Clara said nothing. "How unfortunate. The kingdom has spent 12 years believing its king was gone, while he has been playing at being ordinary." Elias stepped between Marcus and Clara. Marcus smiled. "There he is. The instinct never disappears." His gaze returned to Clara. "Do you know what your husband is, Mrs. Thorne? He is the last known heir of the first Alpha bloodline. His voice can reach something older than law, older than rank, perhaps older than the packs themselves." Miriam stiffened. "That power was never meant for conquest. Power is meant to be used," Marcus replied. Clara looked at Elias. "Is that what the first howl is?" Elias did not move. Marcus answered for him. "A gift kings would surrender kingdoms to possess. One command from him, and an alpha can forget his pride. A pack can forget disagreement. Imagine what 12 divided territories could become under one unquestioned voice. Clara felt suddenly sick at the word unquestioned. Marcus stepped closer. Come back, Elias. The throne is waiting. Elias picked up his board. No, Marcus's smile vanished. Then perhaps your new wife can persuade you. Clara saw Elias tense. Marcus turned toward her. Do you truly believe he chose you because of some beautiful accident? An unwanted Omega was perfect for a man desperate to remain forgotten. No powerful family would investigate you. No court would follow you. You were not his destiny, Clara. You were his hiding place. The words found the oldest wound in her with cruel precision. Clara looked at Elias. He reached for the board, but she raised her hand. Do not answer yet. She slowly removed the simple wedding ring from her finger. Elias went pale. Marcus smiled again. Clara stepped forward and placed the ring in Elias's palm. Then she closed his fingers around it. I married Elias, she said. Not a king, not a bloodline, not a legend. His eyes searched hers. But I will not build a marriage around secrets either. She touched the board between them. So choose me again, this time with the truth. For several seconds, Elias could not move. Then he turned the board over and began writing. Marcus glanced down at the words, and for the first time that night, confidence disappeared from his face. Elias had written only one sentence. Marcus did not find me because the archive was opened. Clara looked at him. Elias continued writing. He knew where I was all along. Marcus's expression changed for only a second, but Clara saw it. That was enough. Elias turned the board toward her and continued writing. He allowed me to disappear because a silent king was useful to him. Miriam drew a quiet breath. Of course. Clara looked at her. What does that mean? Miriam's eyes remained on Marcus. A dead king becomes a martyr. A missing king becomes a question. But a king who chooses silence can be turned into a warning. Marcus gave a small, impatient sigh. You always did enjoy old riddles, Miriam. Elias wrote again. He waited for the kingdom to become divided enough to fear freedom. Clara understood before Marcus could deny it. 12 years of uncertainty had weakened trust between the packs. Now Marcus could offer them unity, provided Elias supplied the one thing no ordinary ruler possessed: unquestioned obedience. You do not want him on the throne, Clara said. You want his voice. Marcus smiled faintly. I want peace. Peace without choice is only quiet, Clara replied. The words seemed to strike something deep inside Elias. He looked at her, then at the ring still resting in his palm. Slowly, he slipped it onto Clara's finger again. Not as a claim, as an answer. Marcus watched the gesture with visible disappointment. Very touching. Unfortunately, sentiment does not govern kingdoms. He stepped away from the doorway and raised one hand. Several guards moved aside, revealing familiar faces gathered along the forest road. Shopkeepers from the settlement, the miller and his wife. 2 elderly neighbors Clara had seen near Miriam's shrine. No one appeared harmed, but all looked frightened and confused. They will remain here until Elias agrees to return with me, Marcus said. Clara's stomach tightened. Elias immediately stepped forward. She caught his sleeve. No, his eyes told her everything. He could end this in seconds. One word, perhaps 2, and every wolf standing beneath Marcus's authority might obey him instead. That is what he wants, Clara whispered. Elias looked toward the villagers. Responsibility pulled at him from one direction, fear from another. Marcus knew exactly which wound to press. Speak, Elias, he said. Command them to release these people. Prove that you are still their king. Elias's jaw tightened. It would be so easy, Marcus continued. One command, no debate, no uncertainty. No one would ever oppose you again. Clara moved in front of Elias until he had no choice but to look at her. Do not become what you fear just to protect me. His eyes darkened with anguish. She lowered her voice. You told me your power takes away choice. Then give these people something different. Give them a reason to choose you. Elias looked past her at the guards. They were not monsters. Clara could see uncertainty in their faces. Some avoided Marcus's gaze. Others watched Elias with the stunned recognition of people realizing an old story had suddenly become real. Elias lifted his board. He wrote slowly, then held it toward them. I will not command you. A murmur moved through the road. He erased the words and wrote again. You may serve Marcus. You may follow me. You may walk away from both of us. The choice must remain yours. Marcus laughed, but the sound carried less confidence now. You expect soldiers to abandon duty because you wrote something noble on a board? No one moved. For one long moment, Marcus appeared proven right. Then a young guard removed the royal crest from his coat and placed it carefully on the ground. My father served you, he said to Elias. Another guard lowered his lantern. Then another stepped away from Marcus. No order had been given. That was precisely why it mattered. Clara felt Elias's hand close gently around hers. For the first time, she understood what leadership could look like without fear. Marcus understood it too. His face became cold. Enough! He turned toward the ancient moon shrine visible through the trees. If you refuse to use the first howl willingly, perhaps we should discover what awakens it. Miriam suddenly went pale. Elias, the moonstone. Marcus smiled. Yes, let us see what happens when the lost king stands before the place where his bloodline began. The moonstone stood less than half a mile beyond the settlement, hidden inside a circle of ancient white pines. Clara had passed the place before without understanding why no birds nested there or why even experienced wolves avoided crossing its boundary. Tonight, silver light seemed to breathe beneath the clearing. At its center rose a smooth stone nearly 8 feet tall, marked with symbols worn almost invisible by centuries of rain. Marcus walked toward it as if approaching something he had waited years to possess. Elias followed with Clara, Miriam, and the uncertain guards behind him. No one had forced Elias forward. That seemed to trouble Marcus more than resistance would have. Your ancestors understood power, Marcus said. They built kingdoms because others obeyed. Miriam shook her head. That is the version your generation was taught. Marcus turned. And you know better? Miriam opened the ancient book. I know someone removed 7 pages from the royal history after the broken crown. Elias stared at her. Clara saw the realization in his eyes. He had spent 12 years believing the sovereign voice existed to command. What if even that belief had been given to him by people who needed him to believe it? Marcus stepped beside the moonstone. Enough stories. Speak, Elias. Elias remained silent. Tell these wolves to kneel. Nothing. Marcus's patience finally cracked. You would let a kingdom divide because you are afraid of your own voice? Clara stepped beside Elias. Maybe he is afraid of using it for the wrong reason. Marcus looked toward the guards. Bring everyone closer. Several hesitated, but old habits still carried weight. The villagers were guided into the clearing. Clara saw fear moving through them, and suddenly understood Marcus's plan. Pressure, confusion, desperation. He wanted Elias to believe command was the only path left. Elias looked at Clara, and she squeezed his hand. You do not have to prove anything to him. The moonstone suddenly warmed beneath Clara's other palm. She had touched it without thinking. Silver light appeared beneath her fingers. A symbol emerged across the stone, identical to the mark in Elias's cellar. The first howl. Miriam gasped. Clara stepped back. But Clara could not. The light traveled through the carvings until forgotten words appeared across the moonstone. Miriam moved closer and translated in a trembling voice. The first voice does not bind. The willing. It breaks the command that binds them. Silence followed. Clara turned toward Elias. His face had gone still. Your power was never meant to steal choice, she whispered. It was meant to restore it. Marcus shook his head. A mistranslation. No, Miriam said. A buried truth. Marcus immediately ordered the guards to take Elias away. Several obeyed automatically, their years of training stronger than their uncertainty. Elias stepped in front of Clara. His breathing changed. She felt the same pressure she had sensed beneath the cottage. The forest became unnaturally quiet. Elias closed his eyes. For 12 years, silence had been his promise to the world. Now Clara understood that keeping that promise might mean protecting a lie. "Elias," she whispered, "do not speak because Marcus demands it." His eyes opened. "Speak only if you know why." He looked at the frightened villagers, the conflicted guards, Miriam, and finally Clara. Then Elias Thorne drew one slow breath. His voice, when it came, was quieter than anyone expected. "Choose." The word moved through the clearing like warmth through winter air. The moonstone blazed silver. Every royal crest shimmered once, and something invisible seemed to release its hold. Guards looked around as though waking from a long sleep. No one fell to their knees. No one became Elias's servant. Instead, one by one, they simply stepped away from Marcus. Some joined the villagers. Others removed their crests. A few remained where they were, uncertain but free. Elias had commanded no one. That was the miracle. Marcus stared at him. "What did you do?" Elias looked at his own hands, astonished. Clara smiled through sudden tears. "He gave them back what power should never have taken." Miriam turned another page of the ancient book, and her expression changed from wonder to alarm. "There is more." Clara looked toward her. Miriam read the newly illuminated line beneath the first howl symbol. "When the lost king speaks freedom, the second voice will awaken." Deep beneath their feet, something answered with a single distant howl. The distant howl faded beneath white pine, but no one in the clearing moved. Elias seemed almost more shaken by his own voice than anyone else. For 12 years, he had believed speaking would make him dangerous. Instead, one word had restored what fear and authority had taken from others: choice. Marcus looked around at the guards who no longer waited for his commands. "You cannot govern like this," he said. "A kingdom needs obedience." Elias met his eyes. His voice was rough from years of silence, but steady. "A kingdom needs trust." Clara felt those words settle over the clearing. Elias did not order Marcus arrested. He did not demand anyone kneel. He simply asked the royal council to investigate the sealed archives, the missing pages, and every decision made during the years of his absence. The guards agreed to escort Marcus back to the capital, not because Elias compelled them, but because they chose to uphold the law. That distinction mattered. 3 weeks later, Clara stood beside Elias in the restored council chamber at Moonspire. News of the Lost King's return had traveled across all 12 northern territories. Pack leaders arrived expecting a ruler who could bend every wolf to his will. Instead, Elias opened the council by doing something no Alpha King had done in generations. He asked each territory to speak before he did. Some called it weakness. Others called it wisdom. Elias called it listening. When the council offered him the crown, he did not immediately accept. That evening, he and Clara stood alone on the palace balcony, while autumn wind moved through the valley below. "What if they do not want a king who refuses to command them?" Elias asked. Clara smiled faintly. Hearing his voice still felt miraculous, not because it carried ancient power, but because he now chose his words carefully. "Then teach them the difference between leadership and obedience." Elias looked at her. "And what if I forget? Then I will remind you." The next morning, Elias accepted the crown under one condition: the sovereign voice would never again be recognized as a royal right. No ruler would be permitted to use sacred power to replace another person's will. Then, before the assembled council, he turned toward Clara. She expected a proclamation. Instead, he held out his hand. "Clara Whitmore, will you stand beside me? Will you? Not you will." Clara remembered the lonely woman beneath the silver arch, waiting while an entire hall decided she had no value. She remembered the silent stranger who had been the first person to ask what she wanted. "Yes," she said, "I will." Later that night, Miriam found them inside the oldest chamber beneath Moonspire. The ancient book trembled in her hands. "The moonstone changed after Elias spoke," she said. There is a passage that was invisible before. She opened the book. Silver letters slowly appeared across the page. When the lost king speaks freedom, the white Omega shall hear the second voice. Clara stared at the words. The white Omega? Miriam looked at her. I believe it means you. Elias stepped closer. What is the second voice? Miriam's expression darkened. I do not know. The pages explaining it were removed centuries before Marcus was born. She turned the book toward them. Beneath the prophecy was a map showing a place beyond the northern mountains, nearly 400 miles from Moonspire. One symbol marked the center, a white wolf beneath a broken moon. Clara felt an unfamiliar warmth awaken somewhere deep inside her, like a distant song she had somehow always known. Far beyond the kingdom, beneath the ruins of a temple forgotten by every living pack, ancient silver markings began to glow along the walls. In the darkness, something stirred. 2 pale eyes opened, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the forgotten white wolf heard Clara Whitmore's name.